The Great Hall of the Hegemony stretched for nearly half a mile in every direction. Its walls were made of a crystal that had been grown over thousands of years, and they caught the light of the twin artificial suns that floated near the ceiling. The floor was polished so smooth that it reflected everything like a mirror. Thousands of seats rose up in tiers around a central platform, and in those seats sat the representatives of 300 different star systems. This was the Grand Tribunal, the highest governing body in the known galaxy. It met once every galactic cycle to discuss matters of importance to the hegemony. Today, the matter at hand was a newly discovered species on the edge of explored space. Commander stood at the center of the platform, looking out at the assembled delegates with the calm confidence of someone who had done this many times before. He was tall, even by standards, standing nearly 8 feet in height. His skin was covered in scales that shifted color depending on his mood, currently showing the deep blue of formal authority. His eyes were large and golden, with secondary lids that flickered occasionally when he was thinking hard about something. Had served the hegemony for 400 years. He had been a soldier, then a captain, then a fleet commander, and now he held the title of Sentinel Commander. This made him responsible for the security of all hegemony space. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had led the forces that brought new species into the fold of hegemony rule. He had seen things that would break the minds of lesser beings, and he had emerged stronger from each experience. Today's proceedings were supposed to be simple. A new species had been found, and they needed to be evaluated. This happened several times each cycle, and the outcome was always the same. The new species would either agree to join the hegemony peacefully, or they would be forced to join through military action. There was no third option. There had never been a third option in the 3,000 years since the hegemony was founded. The administrative drone floated to the center of the platform beside. It was a small sphere of polished metal, about the size of a human head, and it contained all the information that had been gathered about the new species. A holographic display flickered to life above it, showing a planet that was mostly blue and green, with white clouds swirling across its surface. Planet designation, Sol 3, the drone announced in its flat, mechanical voice. Local name, Earth. Classification. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Secondary eyelids flickered with interest. Classification was rare. It meant that the planet's environmental conditions were considered extremely dangerous to most forms of life in the galaxy. Please elaborate on the classification, said. The drone's holographic display expanded, showing detailed information about the planet. Sol 3 orbits a G-type main sequence star at a distance of approximately 150 million kilometers. The planet has an atmospheric oxygen content of 21%, which creates a highly combustible environment. Most species in the hegemony would find this atmosphere toxic or dangerous. The display shifted to show the planet's surface in more detail. Gravitational force on Sol 3 exceeds hegemony standard by 43%. This means that any hegemony citizen visiting the surface would feel significantly heavier than normal, and prolonged exposure could cause serious health problems. More information scrolled across the display. The planet experiences regular seismic activity, with thousands of earthquakes occurring each year. Volcanic eruptions are common. The atmosphere produces violent storms, including hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical storms. The planet's axial tilt causes extreme seasonal variations, with temperatures ranging from -90 degrees to +60 degrees depending on location and time of year. Delegate Myra, a being made of wispy gas from the methane clouds of Gossamer VII, shuddered visibly. Her form rippled with distress. This sounds like a death trap. How does anything survive there? The drone continued its report. Sol 3 possesses a single oversized moon that creates massive tidal forces. These tides have shaped the evolution of life on the planet in significant ways. Additionally, the planet is bombarded by harmful radiation from its parent star, which has led to high rates of genetic mutation among native life forms. Enough about the planet, said, waving a hand dismissively. Tell us about the inhabitants. The holographic display changed to show images of the creatures that lived on this. They were bipedal, standing upright on two legs. They had 2 arms, 2 eyes, and their bodies were covered in a thin layer of skin rather than scales or fur. They looked fragile, almost pathetically so compared to the robust forms of most hegemony species. The dominant species on Sol 3 calls itself humanity, or Terrans, the drone said. They evolved approximately 300,000 years ago and have developed a technological civilization. Current population is estimated at 8 billion individuals. 8 billion, someone in the audience exclaimed. Anna. Correct. The Terrans have proven extremely adaptable. They have spread across the entire surface of their planet, living in every environment from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. They have developed technology to protect themselves from their planet's hostile conditions. The display showed images of human cities with their tall buildings and crowded streets. It showed factories and farms, ships and aircraft, roads and bridges. The Terrans had clearly been busy. What is their technological level? Asked. Faster than light, the drone answered. They have not yet developed the ability to travel between star systems. However, their rate of technological advancement is unusual. They achieved powered flight only 120 of their years ago and have already sent probes beyond their star system. They have visited their moon multiple times and have established permanent stations in orbit around their planet. Nodded slowly. This was interesting but not particularly concerning. Many species showed rapid technological development in their early stages. It usually slowed down once they reached a certain level of advancement. What else can you tell us about them? He asked. The drone's display shifted again, showing scenes that made several delegates gasp in shock. Images of warfare, of violence, of destruction. Terrans fighting each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons, cities burning, bodies lying in fields. The Terrans have been at war with themselves throughout their recorded history, the drone said. They have developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single strike. They have killed hundreds of millions of their own kind in conflicts over territory, resources, ideology, and religion. Despite this, their population continues to grow, and their technology continues to advance. Studied the images with professional interest. Violence was not unusual among primitive species. Many civilizations went through a warlike phase before they matured enough to join the galactic community. They themselves had been warriors once, before they learned the value of cooperation and order. They consume the flesh of other organisms for sustenance, the drone continued. This includes other sentient species on their planet. They are apex predators who use a hunting strategy called persistence hunting, where they pursue prey over long distances until the prey collapses from exhaustion. Barbaric, muttered Delegate Thane, a massive quadruped from the heavy-gravity world of Prime. His kind were herbivores who found the concept of eating other creatures deeply disturbing. They actively seek out danger for recreational purposes, the drone added. They climb mountains, dive into deep water, jump from aircraft, and engage in combat sports for entertainment. Their psychology appears to be fundamentally oriented toward risk-taking and challenge-seeking. The chamber had grown quiet as the delegates absorbed this information. The Terrans were clearly unusual, even for a species. Most civilizations that developed on hostile planets became cautious and conservative, focused on survival above all else. These humans seem to have gone in the opposite direction, becoming more aggressive and adventurous in response to their challenging environment. Considered the information carefully. The Terrans were primitive, violent, and unpredictable. They lived on a world that would kill most hegemony citizens within days. They had no faster-than-light capability and no way to threaten hegemony space. Schedule standard integration procedures, he said finally. Send a diplomatic vessel to make contact. Offer them the usual terms. If they refuse, prepare a pacification force. The decision was made with the casual ease of long practice, had overseen dozens of first contacts, and they always followed the same pattern. The new species would be impressed by the hegemony's advanced technology. They would be shown the benefits of membership and the consequences of resistance. Most chose to join peacefully. Those who didn't were quickly convinced to change their minds. The administrative drone began preparing the necessary documents. Delegates started to rise from their seats, assuming that the proceedings were concluded. Was about to call for adjournment when the massive doors at the far end of the hall slid open with a soft hiss. Everyone froze. Those doors were not supposed to open during a tribunal session. They were sealed by security protocols that could only be by the highest authorities in the hegemony. Yet they stood open now, and through them walked a figure that made even the most hardened warriors in the room shift uncomfortably. It was a human. She was small by hegemony standards, perhaps 5.5 feet tall. Her hair was dark and cut short in a practical style. Her eyes were brown, and they swept across the assembled delegates with an expression that was difficult to read. She wore simple clothing in muted colors, nothing that looked like either military uniform or diplomatic finery. Her bare forearms showed lean muscle, the kind that came from actual physical work rather than ceremonial exercise. She walked with confidence, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence of the great hall. She did not hurry, but she did not hesitate either. She moved like someone who knew exactly where she was going and was not particularly concerned about what she might find when she got there. "The Terran representative," announced a herald who had appeared from somewhere, sounding slightly confused. "Lieutenant Commander Kate of the Earth Defense Coalition." Stared at the approaching human, his mind racing. How was this possible? The Terrans were pre-FTL. They had no way to travel between stars. They should not even know that the hegemony existed, let alone be able to send a representative to the Grand Tribunal. The human woman reached the central platform and stopped, looking up at without any visible sign of fear or intimidation. She was dwarfed by his height, surrounded by beings who could crush her with a thought, and she seemed completely unconcerned. "You have traveled far," Terran said, finding his voice. "Though I confess puzzlement at how you accomplished this. Our records indicate your species lacks the capability for interstellar travel." Kate met his gaze directly. Her voice was calm and clear when she spoke. "You left one of your ships in our outer solar system. We found it. We figured out how to make it work. We figured out where it came from." A cold sensation crept along his spine. He knew which ship she was talking about. It was an observation vessel, sent to monitor the Terran system while the hegemony decided how to proceed with integration. It was crewed by a full contingent of hegemony scouts, armed and protected by the finest technology available. "The crew?" he asked. "They're fine," Kate said. "We didn't hurt them. They're actually pretty helpful once you get past the initial language barriers. Nice folks. They're being kept comfortable while we sort this all out." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Delegates shouted questions and demands. Security forces moved forward, uncertain of how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Raised his hand for silence, and gradually the noise subsided. "You captured a hegemony vessel and its crew," he said slowly, making sure he understood correctly. "You reverse-engineered its technology. You traveled across 3,000 light-years of space, and you arrived here to do what exactly? Negotiate." Kate shrugged slightly, something like that. Felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger at the audacity of this primitive creature, concern about the implications of what she had accomplished, and buried beneath those feelings something that might have been respect. This human had done something that should have been impossible, and she stood before the mightiest power in the galaxy as if it were nothing remarkable. He decided to be direct. Lieutenant Commander, I admire your audacity, truly, but you must understand your position. The hegemony spans 300 star systems. We command fleets that blot out the light of suns. We have crushed civilizations that were ancient before your species learned to walk upright. He gestured at the vast chamber around them, at the thousands of delegates representing hundreds of worlds. You are one being from one world, standing before powers you cannot possibly comprehend. What do you hope to achieve here? Kate looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was thoughtful, almost curious, as if she were studying an interesting specimen. Then she nodded slowly. Yeah, about that, she said. I've got 5 things to say to you, Commander. You might want to listen carefully. Settled back in his command chair, a smile playing across his scaled features. This was becoming entertaining, at least. The little human thought she had something important to say, something that would somehow change the fundamental reality of her situation. He had seen this before, from countless representatives of countless doomed civilizations. They always thought their words could save them. Please, he said, gesturing magnanimously, share your wisdom with us. What are these 5 things you wish to say? Around the chamber, delegates leaned forward with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Some were clearly amused by the spectacle. Others looked nervous, uncertain what to make of this strange intrusion. A few seemed genuinely curious about what the human might say. Kate stood alone on the speaker's platform, surrounded by beings who could destroy her with a gesture. She seemed entirely at ease. The first thing, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics, is about what you found when you observed our planet. You classified us as a. You noted our wars, our predatory nature, our hostile environment, and you concluded that we were primitives who would either submit or be conquered. An accurate assessment, agreed. No, Kate said, a catastrophic misreading. You looked at our conflicts and saw chaos. What you should have seen was practice. The chamber went quiet. Some amusement flickered uncertainly. Earth has been at war with itself for the entire span of recorded history, Kate continued. 10,000 years of continuous conflict. Every generation has faced battle. Every civilization we have built has been tested by violence. We have developed weapons that can level cities, strategies that can topple empires, and soldiers who will fight to the last breath for causes they believe in. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of species who had known centuries of peace under hegemony rule. Your soldiers trained for decades in academies and simulation chambers. Our soldiers trained from childhood in environments that would kill yours. Your officers study theoretical warfare from textbooks and historical records. Our officers have commanded troops in actual combat, under actual fire, with actual lives depending on their decisions. Found his voice. You threaten us with your primitive conflicts. We have ended wars that span galaxies. We have crushed rebellions on hundreds of worlds. I'm not threatening you, Kate said. I'm explaining. When we captured your observation ship and studied its database, we noticed something interesting. In the last 1,000 years, the hegemony has faced exactly 3 significant military challenges. 3 in 1,000 years. She let that sink in for a moment. We face more than that in a decade, sometimes in a year. Our generals have forgotten more about warfare than yours have ever learned. We have developed tactics and strategies for every conceivable situation because we have had to. Survival demanded it. The truth of her words hung in the air like smoke. Thought of the last military campaign he had overseen. It had been a police action against a rebellious colony, a minor world that had decided to stop paying its tribute. The entire conflict had lasted 6 standard days and ended when the colony's leadership realized they had no chance of winning. It had been considered a lengthy engagement by hegemony standards. That's the first thing, Kate said. You didn't find a primitive species on a hostile world. You found a civilization of soldiers on a training ground. Every single human being alive today is descended from an unbroken line of survivors going back millions of years. We didn't just adapt to we thrived on it. We conquered it. And we did it by becoming the most dangerous predators our planet has ever seen. Studied the small human standing before him. She was physically unimpressive, fragile-looking, with no natural weapons or armor. And yet she spoke with absolute conviction, as if she truly believed that her species of primitives could somehow stand against the might of the hegemony. "You speak well," he said finally. "But words do not win wars, Lieutenant Commander. What else do you have to say?" Kate smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That brings me to the second thing." She reached into her pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. Immediately, a dozen weapons trained on her from various points around the chamber. Energy shields flickered to life around the most important delegates. His personal guard moved forward, their weapons humming with deadly potential. Kate's hand emerged from her pocket holding a small data crystal. She held it up for inspection, showing that it was nothing dangerous. "Relax," she said. "It's just information, may I?" Hesitated, then nodded. A security officer stepped forward and took the crystal from her hand, scanning it carefully before inserting it into the chamber's holographic system. A new display materialized above the speaker's platform, showing technical specifications, mathematical formulas, and engineering diagrams. "This is your FTL drive technology," Kate said. "Full schematics, operating parameters, theoretical underpinnings. Everything you use to travel between stars. We obtained this from your captured ship." Delegate Thane snorted dismissively. "Theft. Hardly impressive. Any primitive could copy what they do not understand." "We didn't just steal it," Kate said. "We improved it." She gestured, and the display shifted to show modified versions of the same schematics. The changes were subtle but significant, alterations to the fundamental geometry of the drive systems and the way power was distributed through them. "Your drives operate at maximum efficiency of approximately 17%, Kate explained. "You've been using this technology for 6,000 years and never pushed past that threshold. Your scientists told you it was impossible, that the theoretical limits had been reached, that no further improvement was possible." She paused and her smile widened slightly. "Our scientists don't believe in impossible, they believe in not yet." The technical displays continued scrolling, showing test results and performance data. His engineering background was limited, but he could recognize the fundamental nature of what he was seeing. The numbers suggested efficiency gains that bordered on the absurd. "We've achieved 43% efficiency in laboratory conditions," Kate said. "We expect to reach 60% within the year. That means our ships can go farther faster with less fuel than any vessel in your fleet. And this is just the beginning. We've only had 6 months to work with your technology. Give us a few years and we'll make it do things you never imagined." The chamber had gone very quiet. The technical specialists among the delegates were staring at the displays with expressions of shock and disbelief. Some were already whispering to each other, debating the validity of what they were seeing. "The second thing," Kate said, turning back to face directly, "is that whatever technology you have, we can take it, understand it, and make it better. You've had 6,000 years of incremental improvement because you had no pressure to innovate. You had no enemies who could challenge you, no rivals who could threaten you. You got comfortable." She gestured at herself, at her simple clothing and body. "We've had 100 years of explosive development because we're always racing against each other. Our nations compete for every advantage. Our companies fight for every market. Our scientists argue and debate and prove each other wrong because that's how we find the truth. Your technological advantage isn't an advantage. It's a starting point." Felt the first stirring of genuine concern. The hegemony's power had always rested on its technological superiority. They had better ships, better weapons, better everything. It was what allowed them to maintain control over 300 star systems with relatively small military forces, if that advantage could be erased. He pushed the thought aside. The human was bluffing, trying to make herself seem more important than she was. Even if her claims about drive efficiency were true, it would take years for the Terrans to build a fleet capable of challenging the hegemony. They would be conquered long before that happened. "Impressive claims," he said, keeping his voice steady. "But claims are easy to make and hard to prove. What else do you have to say?" Kate nodded as if she had expected this response. "The third thing is about your empire itself, about what holds it together." High Arbiter Selene, eldest of the hegemony's governing council, leaned forward from her elevated seat. She was ancient even by standards, her scales faded to a pale, her eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence. She had guided the hegemony through centuries of prosperity, and she had little patience for challenges to her authority. "Child of Earth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages, "you speak of warfare and technology as though these things matter, but the hegemony endures not through force alone. We are united. 300 star systems bound by common purpose, common law, common loyalty. Your single world, however formidable, cannot stand against such unity." Kate turned to face the ancient arbiter. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, actually, your unity." She began walking slowly around the speaker's platform, her eyes moving across the assembled delegates. "We've had access to your captured crew for several months now. Good people mostly. Scared at first, but we have ways of making conversations productive. They told us about your hegemony, about how it works, about what holds it together." She stopped and her expression hardened. "You're not united, Arbiter, you're terrified." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the background hum of the chamber's system seemed to fade away. "Your hegemony isn't built on common purpose," Kate continued. "It's built on fear. Fear of your enforcement fleets. Fear of economic sanctions. Fear of being designated as rebels and crushed. Every species in this room has a list of grievances they've never voiced, resentments they've buried, dreams of independence they've abandoned because they believe resistance is futile." She turned and pointed at a cluster of delegates from a region New had been restive for decades. They were beings with hard shells and compound eyes. They flinched visibly at her attention. "You lost 40% of your population in the integration wars," Kate said. 2 billion of your people dead. Yours was bombed into submission. Your culture was suppressed. Your leaders were executed. You've never forgotten that. You've never forgiven it. You just learned to keep your heads down and pretend to be loyal." Her finger moved to another group, avian creatures with brightly colored feathers. "Your world's resources are being stripped to feed hegemony expansion. Your forests are being cut down. Your seas are being drained. Your people work in mines and factories under conditions that would be considered criminal under your own pre-integration laws. You hate every second of it, but you're too afraid to speak up." And another group, beings of pure energy contained in crystalline shells. "Your religious practices were outlawed 2 centuries ago. The hegemony decided that your beliefs were incompatible with good order and social harmony. You worship in secret now, in hidden places, always afraid of being discovered. You pray for deliverance from the empire that conquered you." The accusations hung in the air. Saw the truth of them in the subtle shifts of body language throughout the chamber, the averted gazes, the tightening of jaws, the way certain delegates suddenly found the floor very interesting to look at. He had always known, on some level, that the hegemony's unity was not as solid as it appeared. There were always grumblings, always complaints, always minor acts of defiance that had to be dealt with. But hearing it laid out so bluntly, by an outsider who had no reason to lie, was unsettling. "The third thing," Kate said, "is that your empire is held together by fear and force, not loyalty or love. And here's what you need to understand about humans. We're very, very good at giving people a reason to hope." She looked around the chamber one more time, meeting the eyes of delegates from a dozen different species. "We're not here to conquer you. We're not here to replace one empire with another, but we are here to offer an alternative, a choice. And once people know they have a choice, they start to think. They start to wonder. They start to ask themselves whether this is really the best they can do. Rose from his seat, his patience finally exhausted. He had listened to enough. This human had walked into his chamber and insulted everything the hegemony stood for. She had accused them of tyranny, of oppression, of holding their member species in bondage. She had tried to turn his own people against him with her words. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs that had begun spreading through the chamber. "You speak of hope, of choice, of revolution, but let me share a truth with you, Lieutenant Commander." He descended from his command platform, his considerable height towering over the human representative. His honor guard flanked him, their weapons ready, waiting for his order. He stopped just a few feet from Kate, close enough to see the individual pores of her skin, the tiny scars on her hands, the steady beat of her pulse in her throat. "In 400 years of service," he said, "I have seen dozens of species believe they could challenge the hegemony. They are all gone now, not defeated, not subjugated, gone, erased from existence. We do not simply win our wars, Lieutenant Commander. We end the very possibility of future resistance." He let the words sink in, watching her face for any sign of fear or uncertainty. He saw none. "Your species impressed me, I admit," he continued. "Your audacity, your innovation, your martial heritage, all worthy of respect, but none of it matters against the simple arithmetic of extermination." He gestured, and the chamber's holographic display changed to show a fleet of massive warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one capable of destroying entire planets. 100 Extinction-class warships stand ready at this moment, said. Each one is capable of rendering a world uninhabitable within hours. Atmospheric dispersal weapons that will make your air unbreathable. Tectonic disruptors that will tear your continents apart. Biological agents that will kill every living thing with human DNA. He leaned closer to Kate, so close that he could smell the strange alien scent of her body. Your Earth, your colonies if you have any, your entire solar system could be sterilized before a single Terran ship reached us in response. This is the reality you face. Submit now peacefully, and your species will be permitted to survive under hegemony governance. Resist, and you will join the countless others who believe they were exceptional. Kate looked up at him. She was perhaps half his size, unarmed, alone, facing the full military might of an interstellar empire. And yet something in her expression made secondary hearts skip a beat. It was not fear. It was not defiance. It was something closer to pity. "That brings me to the fourth thing," she said quietly. She did not step back. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood there, a small human woman facing down an alien warlord, and spoke as calmly as if she were discussing the weather. "We knew about your extinction fleet before we came here," she said. "We know where it's stationed. We know its deployment protocols and response times. We know the names of every ship, the records of every captain, the maintenance schedules and supply chains that keep them operational." Felt his blood turn cold. "Your captured crew was very helpful," Kate continued. "And your computer systems are surprisingly easy to access once you understand the basic architecture. We've been reading your mail for months, Commander. We know everything." She reached up and tapped a small device attached to her collar. "Right now, as we speak, a Terran task force is moving into position around Epsilon Station. That's where your extinction fleet is based, isn't it? Nice facility, good defensive positioning, but not good enough." His communication device chirped urgently. He raised it to his ear with a hand that was not quite steady, and the frantic voice of his intelligence officer confirmed everything the human had just said. Terran ships, hundreds of them, appearing from nowhere, using drive signatures that matched the improved efficiency the human had described, surrounding the extinction fleet before it could deploy. "We didn't come here to negotiate from weakness, Commander," Kate said. We came here to inform you that the balance of power has already shifted. Those 100 extinction ships, they're currently surrounded by 200 vessels carrying a new generation of weapons. Weapons based on your own technology but optimized for actual combat conditions. Our ships are faster, our weapons are more powerful, and our crews have been training for this specific scenario for the past 6 months. She stepped back, finally putting some distance between herself and the towering commander. The fourth thing is that we didn't come here asking for permission. We came here to tell you that the hegemony's era of unopposed dominance is over. The Grand Tribunal descended into chaos. Delegates shouted conflicting demands. Security forces scrambled to establish communication with Fleet Command. The carefully maintained illusion of hegemony invincibility crumbled with every new report that filtered into the chamber. Stood frozen, his mind racing through scenarios and finding no acceptable outcome. The Terran task force held position around Epsilon, making no aggressive moves but maintaining weapons lock on every extinction-class vessel. It was a standoff, but one that demonstrated capabilities the hegemony had never imagined possible from a pre-contact species. He had underestimated them. He had dismissed them as primitives, as barbarians, as animals who happened to have developed tools. And now, those primitives held the most powerful weapons in his arsenal hostage. Kate waited patiently through the confusion, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression calm. When the noise finally subsided to a dull roar, she cleared her throat. "The fifth thing," she said, and somehow her voice carried over the tumult. "The most important thing." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the small human woman who had just shattered 3,000 years of political certainty. "We could destroy you," Kate said simply. "Not just the extinction fleet, everything. Your shipyards, your command stations, your core worlds. We've had 6 months to study your infrastructure, and we've identified the 17 critical nodes that keep your hegemony functioning. We could hit all of them simultaneously. Your empire would collapse within a year, and there would be nothing you could do to stop it." Found his voice. It came out as barely more than a whisper. "Then why haven't you?" Kate looked at him, and for the first time he saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. Something that looked almost like sympathy. "Because that's not who we are," she said. "We didn't survive by being mindless destroyers. We survived by being adaptable, by learning, by finding ways to turn enemies into allies when possible. The fifth thing I want you to understand, Commander, is that we came here to offer you a choice." She turned, addressing the chamber as a whole. Her voice rose, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "You can try to fight us. You will lose. Your extinction fleet is neutralized, your technological advantage is gone, and half of your subject species are already wondering if this is their chance at freedom. War with humanity will tear the hegemony apart. Millions will die, worlds will burn, and at the end of it you will still lose because we are better at war than you have ever needed to be. Or," she continued, "you can work with us, not as subjects, not as conquered peoples, as partners, as equals. We have skills and perspectives you lack. You have resources and established structures we could never build alone. Together, we could face the challenges that neither of us can handle on our own." "What challenges?" Arbiter Selene asked. Her ancient voice was trembling, whether from fear or emotion could not tell. Kate's expression grew serious. "You think you've mapped the galaxy, but you've only scratched the surface. There are things out there that make the hegemony look small. We've seen hints of them in your own classified archives. Signals from beyond the galactic rim. Evidence of civilizations that rose and fell before the first crawled out of their primordial seas. Something wiped them out. Something that might still be out there." She let the words sink in. "Humanity isn't your enemy, Commander. We're your wake-up call. The galaxy is bigger and more dangerous than you've allowed yourselves to believe, and the only way any of us survives what's coming is together." The chamber was silent. stared at the human woman who had walked into the heart of his empire and torn apart every assumption he had ever held. Her words echoed in his mind. Not threats but truths, not demands but offers, not conquest but partnership. He thought of the species he had subjugated over 4 centuries of service, the rebellions he had crushed, the worlds he had burned. He had always believed it was necessary, that the hegemony's order was better than chaos, that his people knew best how to govern the galaxy. But looking at this human, at her calm confidence and her offers of cooperation, he wondered if he had been wrong, if the hegemony had been wrong, if there was another way. "What do you propose?" he asked finally. Kate smiled. This time it reached her eyes. "I propose we talk, really talk. No threats, no posturing, no assumptions of superiority on either side. Just 2 species figuring out how to share a universe that's far stranger than either of us understood." She extended her hand toward him, palm up, in what he recognized as a Terran gesture of peace and greeting. Commander looked at that small, fragile hand. He looked at the human woman who had humbled him with 5 simple statements. He looked around the chamber at the faces of delegates who had spent their entire lives under hegemony rule, seeing the same mix of fear and hope he felt in his own hearts. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand in his own massive grip. "Very well, Lieutenant Commander," he said. "Let us talk." The following hours were the most intense of his long life. Kate proved to be as formidable a negotiator as she was a strategist. She did not gloat over her victory or press unreasonable demands. Instead, she laid out a framework for cooperation that was surprisingly fair to both sides. The hegemony would remain intact, but its governance structure would be reformed. Subject species would be granted greater autonomy and representation. The extinction fleet would be decommissioned, and its resources redirected toward exploration and defense. Humanity would share its technological innovations, and in exchange, the hegemony would share its accumulated knowledge of the galaxy. Most importantly, a joint task force would be established to investigate the signals from beyond the rim. Whatever had destroyed those ancient civilizations, humanity and the hegemony would face it together. Not all the delegates were happy with these arrangements. Some saw it as a humiliating surrender. Others feared that their positions of power would be diminished. But as the hours passed and the details were hammered out, a consensus began to emerge. The old order was over. Something new was beginning. As the session finally drew to a close, found himself standing beside Kate on the observation deck of the Grand Tribunal. The twin suns had set, and the crystal walls of the chamber sparkled with the light of distant stars. "You planned this for years," he said. "It was not a question." Kate nodded. "Since we first detected your observation ship, we knew we couldn't match your technology, so we had to find another way. We studied everything we could find about your society, your history, your psychology. We identified your weaknesses and figured out how to exploit them. The 5 things you said, each one was calculated." "Each one was true," Kate corrected. "That's what made them effective. I didn't lie to you, Commander. I didn't need to. The truth was damaging enough." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are a dangerous species, Lieutenant Commander. We prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable." She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you chose to listen. I didn't want to fight a war. Nobody wins those, not really. Too many people die, too much is destroyed, and the survivors spend generations trying to clean up the mess. You would have won." "Probably, but that doesn't mean I wanted to." She looked out at the stars. "We've spent our entire history fighting each other. It's made us strong, but it's also cost us so much. I'd like to think we've learned something from all that pain, that we can find a better way." Considered her words. He thought of the species he had conquered, the rebellions he had crushed, the lives he had ended in the name of order and stability. He had always believed it was necessary. Now he was not so sure. "What happens now?" he asked. Now we get to work, Kate said. We've got a lot to do. Reforms to implement, task forces to organize, mysteries to investigate. It won't be easy, and there will be plenty of people on both sides who try to sabotage what we're building. But I think we can do it. She extended her hand again, and this time took it without hesitation. Partners, he said. Kate smiled, partners. And so it began. The hegemony that had ruled 300 star systems for 3,000 years entered a new era, one defined not by fear and force but by cooperation and shared purpose. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and conflicts, misunderstandings and betrayals. But for the first time in living memory, there was hope. Hope that had been brought to them by a small species from a hostile world. A species that had looked at an impossible situation and found a way through. A species that had turned enemies into allies with 5 carefully chosen utterances. Commander would spend the rest of his long life working alongside the humans, and he would never quite get over his amazement at what they could accomplish. They were everything the reports had said: violent, unpredictable, risk-taking, dangerous. But they were also creative, adaptable, and surprisingly compassionate when given the chance. They were Terrans, and they had changed everything.